like to welcome our third panelist, Alexandra Clarke. Alexandra worked for Temagami First Nation as their climate change researcher, looking at how climate change is and will impact the vibrant remote island community accessible by ice road during the winter. She is passionate about spreading science-based education and awareness and recognizes a great need for all communities to have the capacity to look at the effects of climate change and its cumulative effects. Please welcome Alexandra Clarke.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here today. I'm coming from the traditional territory of the Temagami Anishinaabe. I worked on climate change and cumulative effects research here for the past 2.5 years, and I've been on many adventures, including to the highest point of Ontario, Ishpetina Ridge. So Temagami is a lovely island community located in northern Ontario, about 450 kilometers or just under 5 hours north of Toronto. You wouldn't think that the weather is that much different, seeing as it's really not that far on the map. It's not even, it's just not very far away. So you'd think it'd be pretty similar. But just 5 hours north of Toronto, you can drive on an ice road with your passenger vehicle. So last time I drove on the ice road was March 30th of this year. I drive an SUV, and it's about a 5-kilometer drive one way, and the scenery is spectacular. A TFN community member recently posted some ice measurements from Friday, April 22nd, and there's still about 14 inches of ice in the part that he was looking at. And I was there at the landing taking a look at what people were doing, and I still saw snowmobiles driving across the lake. So why am I talking about an ice road? Well, the weather determines when the ice road becomes stable enough for travel, and climate determines if we should be able to expect ice roads from year to year. I've looked more at how weather and climate affect people and the environment as opposed to how we predict it in the research that I've been doing. So, to gain more perspective, we need to define weather versus climate, and you can't really talk about one without considering the other. The difference between weather and climate is a measure of time. Weather is short-term atmospheric conditions, typically over days to months. An example is rain yesterday, or the weather forecast we hear on the news or check on our phones usually. It's important information that we take in on a regular basis that helps us make informed decisions. So do I need an umbrella today? Is it time to switch the snow tires to the all seasons on my car? Or how heavy of a jacket do I need when I'm leaving the house in the morning? So climate is kind of like your longer term predictions. It's just kind of like something that you see like, over 30 years. So when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about changes to the long-term averages and trends for daily weather. So here we're looking at a temperature graph of Toronto. This is December 2021. We can see that their lowest was in around the end of the month there. It was about -7. In this next graph here, we're going to look at the temperature in Temagami. This is the same time period, this past December. And we see that the low at the end of the month there was around -27. And this is when the ice road was really starting to build up, and we were starting to see snowmobile travel in around that time. And these cold temperatures are really important for, having that ice form. So I know that these two graphs here, they look pretty similar, but I just want to highlight that there's like a difference in the scale here on the left-hand side. So back to the ice road. The ice road provides essential seasonal infrastructure to many communities in Ontario and across Canada. So here's just a small snapshot of Ontario, some of the ice roads that are used. So you see that there's a lot of these remote communities. A lot of these are Indigenous communities in Northern Ontario. And these seasonal winter roads are here in the dotted red line. So why are ice roads important? It's a lot for transportation. You get your essential seasonal infrastructure. It's a cheaper method of transporting large and heavy goods. So maybe you're building a house or something. It's way cheaper to move those goods across, 5 kilometers of frozen lake during the winter when you can drive it there, as opposed to barging where you're looking at, $600-800 one way just to travel 5 kilometers. It adds up pretty quickly. So, climate change impacts the integrity and availability of seasonal ice roads, which could impact community physical, social, cultural, and economic vulnerabilities. If climate change trends towards unfavorable winter road conditions, an adaptation strategy is going to be needed in response to the impacts that climate change is going to have in the future. And those are some things that we need to start considering earlier rather than later so that we're prepared for them in the future. So, what else do we consider? Maybe something a little less long term than ice road integrity. We're probably going to have an ice road next year, but who knows if we're going to have an ice road 50 years from now? Maybe the climate's going to change so much by that time that ice roads are a little bit more unfavorable. We're not sure yet. A pressing issue in remote communities is winter storms. So, conditions often lead to situations where major highways, such as the Trans Canada Highway, and this is Highway 11 here in Northern Ontario, are shut down for significant amounts of time. So, back in the winter of 2019 to 2020, Highway 11 was shut down in Temagami overnight. And this resulted in hundreds of people being stranded up here only with their vehicles. There's very limited accommodations. So, we have to make sure that we have infrastructure available in Canada to, help and accommodate people for when these large snowstorms or other weather events happen. So, and I'm from Southern Ontario, so I was pretty shocked when I came up to Northern Ontario and saw how often we actually plow the roads here. It's a lot less in Northern Ontario, and I think this leads to a lot of issues in terms of safety and road conditions. So maybe in an adaptation strategy, we need to increase the amount of road clearing in the future. So, something else that we can consider that's a little bit closer and we see every year that has to do with weather is the spring freshet and flooding. And there's several aspects in here that have to do with, snowfall and temperature. Flooding is detrimental and can cause huge amounts of property damage. And we need to worry about flooding during the spring freshet. Spring freshet is like the spring thaw, and over the winter, the snow builds up. And how does the weather affect this? So, this is just something that we have to consider. And people who operate these dams, so in Northern Ontario here, this is Ontario Power Generation, they go and they characterize the amount of snow that's on the ground in different areas so that they can predict how much melt we're going to get during the spring freshet. And this will tell them like how much they need to lower or just lower the water level in these like receptacle basins so that that melting water has somewhere to go. So there's a lot of science in there to make sure that other communities don't get flooded out and everybody's safe. And it's not all just about cold weather and snow that we need to look at when we're thinking about climate change and what we have to consider in the future. Other impacts weather and climate have are drier summers. This impacts food security for everyone and increases the risk during fire season. It's good to know ahead of time if we're going to be experiencing a hot and dry summer without significant rainfall. We've been practicing forest fire suppression for some time now, so forest fire fighting, meaning that the duff layer is not naturally being burned from time to time from those smaller fires. So what happens is that duff layer in the forest builds up, and we get like these more intense fires because there's more of that material to burn. And we're starting to hear about forest fires more and more, and they seem to be getting more severe. There are some species that do require fire and heat to reproduce. That's something like a jack pine, which its cones only open up when you get that heat, and that's how they spread and reproduce. It's part of that system. But forest fires are something that we have to be concerned and cognizant about, just how they impact the economy, the environment, and jeopardizing the safety of people. And then, so there's a lot of weather impacts, and bringing it into the conversation in a relatable way is hopefully something that encourages people to learn more about meteorology, climate change, and the interactions between, weather, climate, and what adaptation and mitigation methods we probably need to start planning earlier rather than later. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.